I will be honest, I have on a lot of occasions felt like I should just give up on downtown, that whoever the people of Seattle vote for, that's clearly what they want. But we all know, those of us with common sense who can think rationally, we know that we can't write Seattle off, because we know that what happens in Seattle finds its way to other areas of our state. What happens to Seattle, the policies pushed in Seattle, find their way and their tentacles into what happens in state government. We've seen that. We've seen how progressive the Democratic majority has become in Olympia, and that some of the ideas that first rear their ugly head in Seattle eventually make their way down to the state capitol. And we have a huge election in Seattle this year, 7 of 9 Seattle City Council seats. And there's this part of me that wants to hope that Seattle voters have had enough, that they see how far things have fallen. And then there's this other part of me that keeps being reminded of all the times I thought that, only to be deeply disappointed. I am on the verge right now of losing hope. And I say that completely absent hyperbole, because I just see what happened in the Seattle City Council yesterday, and I think that sanity must have gone out the window somewhere. So we know it is not in dispute that there is a drug crisis in the city of Seattle, and frankly across Washington state, but particularly when we talk about open air, blatant drug use, drug selling, when we talk about the human suffering and destruction that results from substance abuse, we see it playing out every single day on the streets of Seattle, in the heart of Seattle, in the tourist zones of Seattle. Again, this is not in dispute. I would challenge you, if you walk down 3rd Avenue today, I bet you'll see someone overdosing on drugs, because it's almost hard to miss. So back in April, while Washington state lawmakers were going back and forth on, do we pass a law to make sure that drug possession remains a crime in Washington state? During that time, you had cities across the state and counties who were saying, okay, if the state doesn't do it, we have to. We have to have our own laws on the books that we can enforce in case state lawmakers fail, and starting July 1st, drugs are de facto legalized. So even in Seattle, thank God there are a couple common sense politicians, Ann Davison, the Seattle city attorney, and 2 other members of the city council. They came forward and said, hey, we have to step up. We have to have an ordinance on the books that makes drug possession and open air drug use a crime. Here's Ann Davison back in April.
The drug abuse epidemic is a humanitarian crisis that deserves just as much urgency as we gave to the COVID-19 pandemic. Instead, every day, people on our streets are dying of overdose and drug-related harm. It's time to face the facts. What we've been doing these past years isn't working. Year over year, overdose deaths rose by 72%. And no neighborhood has been untouched by the scourge of the drug abuse epidemic.
And as she said, again, common sense. We have to face the facts. What we've been doing hasn't been working. What we've been doing, you cannot look at what's happening on the streets of Seattle and say, yeah, what we've been doing for the past 10 years hasn't been working. And let's be clear. There has been essentially de facto drug legalization in Seattle for a decade. I remember when I first started as a journalist in Seattle 13 years ago, doing ride-alongs with the Seattle Police Department, rolling down alleyways where they would see someone smoking something out of a pipe and they would say, the city attorney at the time, Pete Holmes, he's not going to prosecute that anyway, so we're not going to arrest. So de facto drug legalization has been the reality in Seattle for a long time. And what Ann Davison was saying in April is that cannot be the reality any longer. We have seen the implications of that. We have seen the impacts of that. So she proposed a piece of common sense legislation to make sure that in Seattle there is an ordinance on the books that says you cannot use drugs in public. You cannot possess illegal drugs. And yesterday, the Seattle City Council voted on it. Now, going into the vote, there was a belief that it would shake out 5-4 and that it would pass. That was the belief going into it. That was the prevailing wisdom of the vote count. And certainly we knew that there were going to be some council members who were opposed to it. You know, Councilwoman Tammy Morales, who's running for re-election, by the way, just put a pin in that because we're going to bring that back up later on. Councilwoman Tammy Morales, who represents the area around South Seattle, Chinatown International District. She's essentially Kshama Sawant light. I think she's more of a socialist than she is a progressive. She voted against this yesterday, and her argument is that it would resurrect a failed war on drugs. Here she is.
This bill is not intended to solve substance use disorder. It is not intended to provide treatment to people. It is not intended, even if encouraged, to support pretrial diversion. It is not intended to mitigate the racial disproportionality that always comes when arresting people is made easier. The sole intent then is to put poor people in jail, most of whom will be Black and brown, and then let them out and ensure that they have a record that follows them forever and makes it harder to get a job or get housing. I still hear neighbors talking in South Seattle about the trauma caused by the Weed and Seed program, another effort to target users and round them up, especially in communities of color. Let's be very clear that what hangs in the balance today is whether we will vote to put Black and brown people in jail.
That's what hangs in the balance today. That's what she thinks hangs in the balance today. That's what she believes in a city like Seattle. The only possible rationale for proposing an ordinance to make public drug use a crime, the only possible rationale is because you want to put Black and brown people in jail. For the love of God. We're going to get to you, Tammy Morales, coming up in a little bit. So, not a surprise she votes against it. Shama Sawant votes against it. Teresa Mosqueda votes against it. Lisa Herbold, who, that woman cannot leave the Seattle City Council fast enough. Thank God she's not running for re-election, but I wish there were a way to get her out of office sooner. She votes against it. And then Andrew freaking Lewis. Andrew freaking Lewis, the councilman for downtown Seattle, the area most impacted by the substance abuse crisis, Andrew freaking Lewis. Prevailing wisdom going into the evening was that he was going to vote in favor of it. He was going to be the deciding vote. A vote for common sense, a vote for sanity, a vote for downtown, a vote to save his city, a vote to save people's lives. Well, here's Andrew freaking Lewis yesterday in the Seattle City Council chambers.
I came out here on the dais today fully prepared to vote for this measure because I do think it is generally proper that we reconcile our SMC to the state law. But with the ending of community court without any additional process, I just can't do it today. I just can't.
No, you can. You can do it today. You didn't want to do it. And don't be confused. Don't be confused. Don't believe that Andrew Lewis suddenly changed his vote out of some impassioned, deep belief that what he was doing was the right thing. No, Andrew Lewis, the coward that he is, changed his vote because a bunch of Shama Sawant socialist alternative supporters showed up in council chambers and yelled and screamed and whined. And that's what they do. Those are the only people who can show up at Seattle City Hall in the middle of the day on a weekday. And Andrew Lewis and others on the council believe that that is reflective of what the populace in Seattle thinks. Whoever shows up in front of them and shouts the loudest, and it's not just me saying that, it's not just me who believes that. Shama Sawant herself, after it became clear that Andrew Lewis was going to be suddenly a no vote, Shama Sawant herself was giddy about it and took responsibility for it, took credit for it, and gave credit to her followers in the crowd.
I'll tell you why whoever changed their vote is because ordinary people showed up and showed that there are going to be real consequences for that vote. That's what happened.
Yeah. So don't believe that what Andrew Lewis did yesterday was brave. What Andrew Lewis did yesterday is what Andrew Lewis does. He is a professional flip-flopper. He blows with the wind. And I'm going to give you an example of that coming up in a moment. But first, let me read some reactions. Ann Davison, the Seattle City Attorney, put out a statement. I'll read part of it for you. She said, "I'm outraged that today some city council members chose to take no action against the soaring opioid epidemic in Seattle. What we've been doing is not working. Our buses, parks, and sidewalks are filled with individuals who need help getting into treatment. Seattle will now be the only municipality in the state of Washington where it is legal to use hard drugs in public. That means drug use on public transit and in our neighborhoods will continue unimpeded. Sadly, because of the obstruction of these council members, overdose deaths are likely to continue to climb, and the city attorney's right. I will say, though, I really truly believe that some of the opposition to the proposal that she put forth has nothing to do with its merits and has everything to do with the fact that Ann Davison is a Republican, with the fact that we have a Republican city attorney in a city where people thought that was almost impossible. And I'll tell you again, it's not just me saying that. It's not just me that has that belief. City Councilwoman Kshama Sawant made it clear as she was talking about her opposition to this. She said that, and she alluded to the fact that this is really about Ann Davison being a Republican. Here's what City Councilwoman Kshama Sawant said about the proposal.
I have zero confidence in how Ann Davison will use this power. Ann Davison joined the Republican Party after Trump was elected.
After Donald Trump was elected. So again, it's not about the actual policy proposal. It's about the fact that Ann Davison is a Republican. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, why does this matter? Why does this matter? Why does Seattle have to pass an ordinance when the state and state lawmakers in a special legislative session put a law on the books to make it a gross misdemeanor to possess illegal drugs? Can't they just enforce the state law? They can. They absolutely can enforce the state law. And Andrew Lewis said that when he was trying to excuse his vote and trying to appease people. He said, hey, everything's good, everything's fine, we don't need an ordinance. The Seattle Police Department can still continue to enforce this based on the state law.
The RCW is going to be in place. The authority of the Seattle Police is completely uninhibited, completely unhindered by whatever we do here today. The Seattle Police, and I want to be completely clear from this dais, the Seattle Police are fully empowered under the RCW to arrest people if they are publicly using and to arrest people for possession.
Now, in theory, that's true. But Andrew Lewis knows full well that in practice, it's not. Here's the problem. Right now, without a city ordinance, the Seattle Police Department could arrest a drug user or someone possessing drugs under the state law. But those cases would have to be referred to the King County Prosecutor's Office, not to Seattle Municipal Court. And here's the thing, and again, Andrew Lewis knows this. That's why what he just said was gaslighting. The King County Prosecutor has already said, we're not going to take those cases. We don't have the personnel to take those cases. The King County Prosecutor's Office already said a long time ago that she supported the city of Seattle passing an ordinance so they could take those cases. So sure, the Seattle Police Department could go out and they could make arrests for every single person using and possessing drugs. That person's going to go to jail. They're going to get right back out because no one is taking the case. Lisa Mannion, the King County prosecutor, put out a statement saying the PAO, this was a part of a letter she sent to the city council telling them this. They knew this. The PAO does not have the staff or resources necessary to take on a new body of misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor cases. Even if the PAO magically had the staff and resources necessary to take on a new body of work, we would focus those resources on felony prosecutions. The city attorney's office is better equipped to handle these cases immediately and with available and offered resources if the Seattle City Council approves the necessary ordinance. So again, Andrew Lewis can say, hey, it's okay though. It's okay that I'm a coward and change my vote at the last minute to help save my district downtown because the police department can still go out and arrest. That would be a waste of the police department's freaking time because no one that they arrest is going to face consequences, is going to get the help they need. I don't even know that they'd be booked into jail, frankly. So again, another example of gaslighting from Andrew Lewis to try to take the heat off of him in the moment. Ridiculous. The Downtown Seattle Association put out a statement. They said, and they represent the business interests downtown and basically the vitality of downtown. That's their goal. Seattle's drug crisis is a public health emergency that is worsening by the day and one that demands urgent action. At a critical time for the recovery of downtown, the use of dangerous drugs in our public spaces is a significant contributing factor to residents, employees, families, and visitors feeling unsafe exploring our city or returning to the office. And in fact, the DSA has a poll that they commissioned that's coming out on Thursday. The full results will come out Thursday, but they did say in that poll, 77% of voters they polled agreed with this statement. Seattle's hands-off approach to people using illegal drugs in public is contributing to rampant street crime and is making it much harder for downtown to recover. 77% of the people polled in Seattle voters agreed with that statement. 63% strongly agreed. So again, who is Andrew Lewis siding with? Now, I'll say this of the Downtown Seattle Association. They don't endorse candidates. They basically release a scorecard for candidates saying, hey, here's the score we give them related to issues important to downtown. If any business in downtown, or in Seattle for that matter, supports Andrew Lewis after this, I can't help you. I'm done. I'm done fighting for you. I'm done trying to be a voice for you, because you will deserve every single thing you get. This is not the first time this man has done this. This is who he is. You know, he said this statement yesterday about how he's spent every waking hour in his time in the council fighting for the people of downtown. Here's what he said.
And I want to speak directly to the people who I know who are watching, who are constituents who I represent downtown, who are business owners, who are residents, who are rightly scared and concerned by the state of substance addiction that is in our streets. And I want to reach out because I have spent every waking hour of my time on this council dais and in service to the city to help downtown recover from that crisis.
Bullshit. Bullshit. And we have the receipts. Andrew, it's 2023. Everything you say, there's a video of it, there's a tweet of it. This is the guy who campaigned for his job in 2019 by promising to hire more police officers. Here he is.
We need to hire more police officers in the city. I see on a daily basis that there's parts of our city where we don't have the staffing numbers to have effective community policing strategies and deter the kinds of crimes of opportunity that are prolific.
He turned around 6 months later and pledged to defund SPD by 50%. That's who he is. He blows with the wind. He listens to whoever shows up at council chambers and screams the loudest. He has done this before. So for people downtown who would even consider, especially in the business community, voting for that man again, giving that man a dime of your money for his re-election campaign, what are you thinking? And sure, you might look at Olga Sagan, for instance, and say, well, I'm not, sure she's not battle tested. I don't know where she's going to stand on these issues. You already know where Andrew Lewis stands. He stands with the loudest voice in the room. He flip-flopped on police funding. He flip-flopped on something as important as criminalizing hard drugs at a time when downtown Seattle is overrun by hard drug users. It shouldn't even be a thought, not even a fleeting consideration to continue to support that man's seat on the Seattle City Council, for the love of God. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit later on in the show, actually to close the show today in our sanity check, about Tammy Morales' claims of a war on drugs, resurrecting a war on drugs. It's fear-mongering. It's not in line with reality. It's gaslighting. It's all of the above. But all I can say, look, the Seattle City Council is going to do what the Seattle City Council does, make bad decisions. They've done that for a long time. Thankfully, several of the people who voted against this common sense piece of legislation have already decided not to run again. Thank God. But several of them are running again. And I firmly believe that if the Seattle electorate is serious about turning the city around, it cannot give one incumbent their job back. Not one incumbent, because they've already shown you what they do. And they gave you a prime example of that last night.